Good afternoon again, and welcome back for our next presentation in the Graduate Student Colloquium. For all of those who are here and with us online, it's my pleasure to introduce Spence Farmer, a student in the Master of Business Administration program. He is also an instructional designer in our online and adult learner department at the University of Southern Indiana. Spence is, as I just said, an instructional designer, and he partners with faculty to build engaging online classes. And was just talking with a couple of other students. At this point, like 90-something% of our graduate students are in online programs. So, Spence is really touching all of our students in one way or another. Spence is also a recipient of the 2023 IACTE Outstanding Future Educator Award. He brings experience in teaching, training, and project management to his work in advancing accessible, high-impact learning. Spence is committed to shaping the future of online education through thoughtful, learner-centered design. Please join me in welcoming Spence.
That was generous. Thank you. What a privilege to be up here sharing cool ideas, hearing cool ideas all day long. So I'm very excited to be here. Swap my pen out. Like you just heard, I'm Spence Farmer. I'm an instructional designer. I work here. I work with faculty and build courses here at USI. And I'm also earning my Master's of Business Administration with an emphasis in project management. To the world, the most, I am what's called a knowledge worker. You might be a knowledge worker. See if the shoe fits here. This is my cubicle, my desk. Apologize for the mess. I got the multiple monitors, right? And in here is where I'm doing my daily tasks. I'm sending emails, making slide decks like I was this morning. Shout out, Lindsay. I'm booking Zoom meetings and watching seminars, taking notes. I'm creating complicated documents and then going to explain those complicated documents to my boss often. I have a big problem. If your job looks like mine, we have a big problem. Increasingly, my daily to-do list can be automated. In fact, I would contend that AI can send emails, make slide decks, book Zoom meetings, watch seminars, and take notes, create these complicated documents, and explain them better and faster than I can. Which leaves a difficult question that's impossible to ignore. What is my job going to be like? I mean, what is my role? What is the future of knowledge work? There's a lot of anxiety around this right now. In the MBA program, students and faculty are abuzz talking about this future, this AI future. You might be feeling this anxiety at your job. I'm not particularly worried, and today I want to tell you why. The following presentation is predicated on two axioms. I contend that intelligence and information will be commodified, if it's not already, and expertise will be widely accessible and increasingly inexpensive. You can feel free to disagree with me on these axioms. I owe you a separate conversation as to justifying these with the current AI tools available to us. But as we proceed, know that I'm thinking about a future where these things are true. A knowledge worker is a worker whose main capital is their knowledge and expertise. Right? So, to make sense of the future of knowledge work, I want to clarify a few things. First, I'd like to define work very carefully. Then I want to define for you knowledge very carefully. And then I want to sew those definitions together and prophesy our Skynet future. Warning. These topics are a bit nerdy. They're a bit theoretical. I'm trying to ground all of these topics in either practical explanations from my life, from perhaps your work, or start from first principles and explain what I mean with a lot of the jargon that's used today. But bear with me. I think by the end, you'll see how these things come together and turn into actionable advice for you in your role. So, part one, what is work? At a glance, seems simple. Work is the tasks you're paid to perform, right? Well, my to-do list from earlier. That's not the whole story, though. Tasks, I would say, are one small part of what's called a value chain. This is something I picked up in the project management master's business administration. A value chain is a sequence of activities that transforms inputs into something useful. All right, value is not created in a single step at a business or an organization, an institution like USI. It accumulates across connected activities. Within a value chain, the technical language is that there are inbound logistics, operations, then marketing and sales, outbound logistics, and service all throughout. But basically, an organization is trying to get stuff that you need to make a thing, make the thing, tell people that you made the thing, send that thing to the people, and then help them if something is going wrong. All organizations are doing this. So within that framework, we have tasks, definitely. But generally, tasks are collected into roles. These are job descriptions, right? So I'm an instructional designer, so I do these kinds of things. And those roles are connected in org charts. This is what we would call an organization's daily operations, right? I have a direct report. I have people who might work under me. And project management is single endeavors that coordinate different roles together with a schedule, a budget, a certain scope, and achieves a certain outcome. So the MBA taught me that work is organized into projects and operations, not tasks. And that organizations optimize for results. They care about the inputs and the outputs, not necessarily what happens in the middle. And to get the outputs, they use these coordinated systems. All right, that's work. What is knowledge? Really feels like a university now, right? What is knowledge? Well, here are my axioms again, right? I said intelligence and information will be commodified, and expertise will be widely accessible and increasingly inexpensive. Notice I don't name drop knowledge in these. I would say that knowledge is not information per se. For the sake of this presentation, I'm going to say that knowledge is information stored in people and our systems. Introducing epistemology, all right? This is the ology of knowledge, the theory of knowledge, its methods, the validity of knowledge, its scope, the investigation of what distinguishes what's believable, what's an opinion, what's true. It's the study of how we know things. And as a result, the study of how we store knowledge in ourselves, in our brains, and then also as institutions. Here's an example. Look at this cute little cardinal. It should be a bald eagle, actually. Sorry, Archie. This is a cardinal on a branch. A bird watcher with binoculars can look at this cardinal and see color, movement, behavior, a mating dance, hear the chirping song. All this knowledge is observational. Now in comes a biologist. A biologist brings a microscope and instead sees feathers, feather structure, cellular detail. The knowledge, the vocabulary, and the viewer are biological. Let's zoom all the way out. Now we're looking from a satellite, looking at the forest where the cardinal is, but we're seeing it as a part of a larger ecosystem. The knowledge is relational and systematic. So in each case, the object hasn't changed, but the perspective has, right? Different tools, methods, contexts produce different forms of knowledge by focusing on different layers of concentric systems. That's nerdy enough for you. I would contend that there is such a thing as epistemic literacy. Epistemic literacy is based on a person's ability to delineate and deploy a wide variety of these tools, vocabularies, with precision and with their intended end in mind. And beyond personal epistemic literacy, people work together to design systems that enforce epistemic clarity. We want to, as an institution, ensure we are handling knowledge cleanly, effectively, efficiently. Enter USI. Universities do this all the time. So here at USI, right now, today, we are creating knowledge. There's research and experimentation going on. We're organizing that knowledge. We're archiving it with databases, classification systems. We're also applying knowledge. We're teaching, making decisions, producing. If you want to be glib, I would say that USI has labs and libraries and lessons all happening in tandem. The MBA taught me that institutions like USI and big businesses maintain sophisticated networks of epistemologies because they are powered by infrastructure and many different people. So back to our thoughts about work. Many different roles are happening to enable the labs and the libraries and the lessons at USI right now. And lots of different departments, different org charts, different hierarchies within USI, and different projects are taking place, like the Grad Colloquium, a one-shot endeavor, bringing a lot of different people into the same room to do something cool together. Now, I'm going to predict the future. Dinner. No, I'm kidding. I do love Chick-fil-A though. I'm weak for Chick-fil-A. So much so that when I decided to give up fast food for this New Year's resolution, one of the first things I tried to do was recreate the classic chicken sandwich at home. I don't know if you've ever done this, but online they have these like copycat recipes, right? This is not how mine turned out, but this is the thumbnail, right, from the YouTube video. If we're being technical about it, this was a small contained project. My outcome was a middling sandwich in a kitchen I can't show you. Lots of oil and panko involved. But in the same few hours it took me to make one lousy version of a Chick-fil-A sandwich, Chick-fil-A itself was producing thousands of sandwiches across the globe. How did they beat me? Well, at Chick-fil-A, knowledge required to produce those sandwiches didn't live in one person like it did in my house. It was distributed across recipes and training programs and supply chains and equipment and standardized procedures, each part encoding decisions about how the sandwich should be made each time. And together, they formed the system that could produce consistent results at scale. This is what institutions do well. This is institutional epistemics. Could I ever beat Chick-fil-A at their own game? Probably not. I will say, Raising Cane's billionaire Todd Graves, if you know the story, has made a pretty good run of it. But for physical goods, like a Chick-fil-A sandwich, there are going to be constraints. Space, materials, capital, things I don't necessarily have. However, at my job, in knowledge work, a lot of those constraints disappear, right? In a lot of ways, I can match institutional capacity if I can understand and recreate and manage its information systems. Now I'm going to predict the future of knowledge work for real. Tools add leverage to human effort. This is self-evident. I can push a tack into a corkboard, but with a hammer, I can put a nail into drywall, and with a nail gun, I can put 100 nails into drywall in the same amount of time. AI, conceived as a tool, changes the distribution of human effort in knowledge work, but it doesn't eliminate the need for human effort. This is the thesis. Pay attention. The modern knowledge worker is a small-scale institution. I repeat, the modern knowledge worker is a small-scale institution, and they should think about themselves like it. So we were talking about operations and projects, right? We imagined each of these nodes as an individual or a role with individual tasks. In a lot of cases, that is not the case. Look. I found it. As tasks become easier to execute, they become less central. All right, value is going to shift upward toward the design and coordination of these processes and projects that produce the tasks. Even individual contributors are increasingly operating at this level, whether they're recognizing it or not. It's happening today. It's probably happening in your role. One useful way to understand this is to treat yourself as a small-scale institution. So in the kitchen, when I was trying to make my sandwich by myself, I was preparation and assembly and the fry cook and the customer. A lot of roles at the same time. Instead of thinking in terms of isolated tasks, it becomes more accurate to think in terms of workflows in inputs and outputs. Here's my current set of working questions that I try to ask myself at my current role. What is the outcome I'm trying to produce? What sequence of steps gets me there? Which steps could be automated, which require human judgment still? How do I evaluate quality? Humans will still decide what matters, what defines success. They'll design the workflow and evaluate the results at the end of it. But AI will increase the scale at which that work can be done. It will condense the schedule, budget, human attention needed for each individual project and org chart. Here's what I'm doing about it. I'm trying to record what I do, exactly how I do it, step by step. In the biz, we're calling this SOPs, or standard operating procedures. If a task is getting done in our department, I'm trying to write it down such that not only can we onboard other people, remember how to do things correctly, right? It's like a recipe card, but we can also scale that with automation. If it's legible to people, often it is legible to machines. I am increasingly building my library of SOPs, whether that's processes that we talked about from earlier, whether that's different recipes for different parts of life. I'm building a library of ideas and procedures such that I can access them whenever I want, however I want. I'm not using the Dewey Decimal System, but there's no cost to me to store lots and lots of files and lots of records. And I am stealing epistemic principles and systems from other industries. Anyone who's doing it better than me, I will steal their methodology, not their intellectual property. But if you want to learn about follow-up appointments and getting follow-up appointments, learn from dentists. If you want to think about cold calls and reach outs, learn from realtors. What are they doing exactly? What are their SOPs? Can you fold that into what you do? I am shaking more hands. Probably the biggest takeaway for me is that as daily work procedures are automated, made easier to finish, I can be more places than behind my desk. Getting in front of people, talking, learning from them in person. All these are hugely valuable and more possible than ever. So my goal is to build a system around my work so that I can spend less time on procedures and more time doing the work that's relational, strategic, and human. If you want homework, here it is. This is your role currently. I would invite you to change to this. Your role tomorrow, automate one task. The process is pretty simple. Write down exactly how it works. What triggers the task? What inputs are you using? What steps do you follow? What does a good result look like? Then ask 2 questions. Could any part of it be automated? Does each step actually add value? Doing this once opens your eyes to realize you can do it many other places. Soon, I think, the AI-powered future will look a lot more like this. My responsibility may be what was nominally multiple roles, some controlled by agents, other tasks partially automated, partially human, and certainly me at the bottom of it, connecting, building trust, and sharing what our department has to offer on the university campus. The advantage does not go to the person who uses AI the fastest. It's going to the person who can make their thinking visible, structure it into workflows, and build the systems that direct it well. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Have any questions for Spence?
I'd like to discuss that last item on your daily. To touch upon a key point here, as we start bringing in more automation to processes, relying more upon AI. Inherently, I think that we miss that human connection to bring that human experience into things. What are your thoughts and in some of the things that you are looking to automate yourself? How are you going to make sure that there's that human connection and that human relation still involved with a project?
Totally. I'm stealing time from myself on the back end to give more face time to faculty personally. So this is specific to my role, but adapt this to your world if you're a listener. I know a lot of times the technical work happens alone or with me and my AirPods, right? Or a podcast or something. And that's important. But if it can be sped up, that frees up hours of the day to be talking to faculty, building relationships, and opening up the strategic avenues that are ultimately going to produce more inputs and more outputs, you know, as a unit. If that makes sense. Yeah. So I see that opportunity basically. Yeah.
So first of all, I think what you presented is right on time. There's so many, I would say, people that are displaced right now because of AI.
Yeah.
And as a student, I noticed some of our courses I'm an online student. there's AI integrated into some of our work, our lessons that we're doing, or our actual assignments that we're doing. Is there a goal for more of that type of instruction where we kind of look at AI as a partner and not as something that we have to fear because of what's happened recently with all the people that kind of relieved from their positions because
Yeah.
of AI? And then I think it's really smart to just make it a tool and not necessarily something that's gonna take out a job.
Definitely. I can't, of course, speak for all faculty or all colleges at USI, but I will say our approach has been leaning into literacy of the tools and handling it, like you're saying, like a tool and not a boogeyman. I think the more hands-on you get with the tools, the more you realize their shortcomings and their advantages. And being a player equipped with all of that strength or strategic advantage makes you, like Megan was saying earlier in our keynote, ultimately a better job candidate and a better student in a lot of ways. Yeah.
And I think, speaking from the perspective of overseeing instructional design, being involved with faculty that are wanting to use AI, trying to keep track of the best learning opportunities for our students, it's key for us to make sure that you as a student learn the ethical use of AI first. But now that you have that, how will AI be used within your chosen career field in giving you those skills on how to use that AI? It may not necessarily be, best practices in how to use ChatGPT, because you may get in a job field and they're using something else for that engine, but providing you those skills that you're going to be needing as you enter the workforce, and that will help give you a leg up when you go into those interviews, that you can talk about that practical experience you had in the classroom.
Absolutely. It's a little meta, but you can imagine the same framework. We talked about the org charts and adopting, sort of consuming more and more roles at agency in your current position. But for future positions, communicating that to employers, that's really exciting, right? Like the fact that you're identifying those workflows or those needs ahead of time, and USI is treating them like, hireable skill sets and important skill sets for the workforce. I feel like it's a big next paradigm.
What app are you using to build your SOPs with AI?
Well, so on record, I'm kind of tool agnostic. I feel like the tool that suits you best is often the best tool. I use Notion personally. It's a note-taking software to store things on the cloud. And then I often find myself using OpenAI tools. Yeah. Yeah.
Is that QR code to your slides?
This is my LinkedIn, but you'll find the slide deck there soon.
There was a slide, it's a list of questions.
Yeah.
4 or 5 slides back. Yeah. So I teach in healthcare, and so I am very concerned about preparing students for AI use, because it is being used, it will be used, but I need them to be good judges of its use. And so I'm giving a lecture on AI tomorrow in the health informatics class. So, but these list of questions really got me to thinking about that balancing act between the use of the AI and critical thinking skills. And so I liked this list of questions because I can turn this almost into assessments for my students as they use those AI tools, because those were really like critical thinking, like ways to examine your process for getting to the outcome.
Absolutely. I love that. I think the most exciting integrations of AI in classwork right now are exactly like that. And like having the student imagine what their workflow will look like when they're up to them to decide what goes in and what comes out and what the quality checks are on either end. Yeah. Very cool.
I really liked your steps too. And I think that you should create a workshop.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about what are the outcomes I'm trying to produce, and what am I doing to get there? What could AI help me automate so that I can do other things or do things better? But I don't feel very confident in my ability to do this. But like, I would go to a workshop doing this, and I would listen to you. And very engaging. Right?
I appreciate that.
So I didn't know if I fidget, but I'm serious. I really think this would be a really cool workshop, right? So, and of course, I'm faculty, so I'm thinking about it from a faculty perspective. But that would be really cool.
Totally. Internally, at least, I know, not to spoil the future or whatever, but we want to fold more and more content like this into our flagship programs around online content development. So the formal ones and the informal messaging that goes out. Totally. Very cool. All right. Shall I escape?
Great job.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention also that about a month ago, I think, the university sponsored a USI TEDx colloquium of sorts, I don't know, but Spence was one of the speakers at that event, and he gave another phenomenal presentation. Those are going to be available in like maybe a month or two or something like that.
Late April, possibly.
Late April. So if you do get a chance when those are available, check out Spence's presentation from the USI TEDx. Okay, I think we have about 4 minutes before our next presenter, who will be presenting virtually. So if you need a minute to get a drink, have some cookies, please do so, and we'll resume in about 3 minutes.